Good morning. It's just my second time again delivering a sermon, speaking in front of you, and I still am having the anxiety of standing in front of you all. And on top of that, the camera too. I'm a little bit camera shy. I like photography. I like videography. I have even done a few documentary film taking and everything, but still on the opposite side of the camera, on the side where I become the subject of the camera, I'm still a little bit shy. So bear with me again. Today, it's not something new. I'm going to put it bluntly on your face. Today, what I'm going to speak is not something new. It's something that we have all known. But the reason I would want to bring this is because for years and years, we have become mature as in our journey with Jesus, in our journey in the church, in the journey that we partake in our discipleship journey. We have come a long way. Some of us it has been 1 year, for some of us it has been 5 years, some of us it has been 10 years, myself including. For me it's almost 27 odd years. But technically speaking, even though I'm born in a Christian family, my discipleship journey didn't start when I was born. Then that's a fact. Everyone can and has to accept it, that even though I am at the core, I'm a very strong Christian. I'm coming from a very strong Christian background. At the core, my Christianship or my Christian discipleship journey, that demo started on day one of me being born. It's only later on that I came to realize certain aspects of my life, and I started retrospecting on certain aspects of my life. It's only when, after a point of time, I realized the importance of certain elements. It's at that time that I sincerely became a Christian or a Christian disciple. And the same thing goes with all of us. Most of us would have born in a Christian family. Some of us would not have been born in a Christian family. Maybe you got converted into Christianity. Whatever the way it is, we have all come to accept the Lord at a later stage of life when we are consciously aware of the situation, the context of life that we grew up in and that we were facing. And hence today's sermon is not too complex, a little bit simple, a little bit normal, and the topic and the theme for today's sermon is understanding discipleship. Understanding discipleship. Give me 1 second. Before we dive further and deeper, I would like all of us to once get to Luke chapter 14, verses 25 to 35. Luke chapter 14, verses 25 to 35. In our journey of understanding discipleship, in our pursuit this morning as we are trying to understand discipleship, I would like all of us to take to Luke 14, 25 to 35, 25 to 35. It's 10 verses. And if we start reading it, we see, now a large crowds were going along with him, and he turned to them and said, so who are this large crowd, and who is he here? He is obviously, who is he here? He is obviously Jesus Christ. This is in Luke, in chapter 14. It is one of the sermons that Jesus Christ delivered. And in this passage, in this one of the sermons that Jesus Christ delivered, you could say that in 25th verse, wherever he went, we see that there was a large crowd that was going along with him. And this large crowd were basically people who have been following him from quite some days, because he has been performing miracles. He has been, proceeding, talking, giving sermons, performing miracles, healing, and all these aspects. And in that context, there was a large crowd that was going and following him wherever he went. And at that point of time, he turned to them and said, Jesus said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. This verse is a very complicated verse, because one of the 10 commandments very clearly says, honor your father and your mother. And throughout the book of the Bible, we always keep saying about the responsibilities that we have as a father, as a husband, as a wife, as children towards parents, as parents towards children, between siblings, between in various relationships that we have in our life, in friendship even. The Bible keeps speaking about what are the responsibilities that we have in discipleship, or what are the responsibilities that we have towards people that we love and care for. And here Jesus Christ says this. Now the problem is, we cannot take certain verses at face value. We need to understand that Jesus Christ was preaching at this location, and he was trying to speak to these people. And in order to grab attention, these kind of statements in oration, as you know, oration is basically storytelling or public speaking. When you're speaking, these kind of verses are basically attention grabbers from the public. So Jesus Christ, when he's following, when he was walking and when people were following, he turned to them and said this. Why? To grab attention. Does that mean that we have to take this verse literally? Definitely not. Because this is not, yes, in a way there is a sense in it. Yes, there is in a way, if you actually understand the depth of it, yes. But what kind of depth? We will go into that. The cost of discipleship, first and foremost, you need to hate everyone, including yourself. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And the second cost of discipleship is in verse 27. It says, whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. It's an irony and it's funny, because I was not actually intending to preach on this passage. I was not intending to preach on it. However, this passage, the passages that we are dealing with today, I have, after a lot of meditation and after a lot of thought, these passages, and I also checked my Lutheran church calendar on what are the passages that we normally preach this week. And these are the passages that were given to me. And the problem and the saddest part, you could say, for me, is I don't like re-preaching the same thing which I preached wherever. In this context, this is my first sermon, unfortunately. My first sermon was based on this passage. However, we are here again. I'll try not to re-preach. I'm trying to go a little different off tangent, but let's go with it. So it says, first and foremost, first cost is that you need to hate your family members, relatives, friends. And second, and then you also have to hate yourself. And the second cost is, whoever does not carry his own cross and does not come after me cannot be my disciple. So the two costs are very interesting. But what I would like to go forward with is the 28th verse onwards. For which of you, when he wants to build a tower, let us say building, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who are watching will begin to ridicule him. Similarly, or what king, 31st verse, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will not first sit down and consider whether he is strong enough with 10,000 men to face the oncoming, face the one coming against him with 20,000. Otherwise, when the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and requests terms of peace. Both the times, before certain things happen, may it be the first time when you're building a tower or a building, you sit down, you discuss the cost, you check the cost. If everything fits out, then only you proceed into building. Secondly, even when you're taking a war, you sit down, you discuss, you see what the other person has, you see what you have. Can we actually face the battle? Can we actually take this responsibility? We think about it, and then only we take the responsibility. It is not as simple as saying, oh, he's coming with 20,000, I have 300 people, let's go for it. It doesn't work that way. We have to look at the logistics of life, and we have to look at the logistics of even discipleship. When Jesus says you ought not to love, your family members, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to love them. It means basically that your love for your family, friends, relatives, and even for your own self should seem so insignificant when you compare it with the love that you have for God. I hope you understand that. When you compare the love that you have for God, the love that you have for your family members, relatives, friends, and for yourself should seem insignificant. It shouldn't have any meaning. It should feel very minute. But the problem that we have, of course, one of the problems that we have in the Christian circle, and I know a lot of people who do this, is that we tend to use the church, God's ministry, or God for a way of excusing ourselves from responsibilities. If there was a time, let us say, there was this one person I know, a little small boy. Every time his mom says, he used to stay near our church back in India. So what happens was, whenever his mom asks him, go and get some, stuff from the grocery store or something like that, he would say, Mom, no, I have to go to the church. And he comes to the church, simply plays with the kids over there, and again goes back. The problem here is, when we take our responsibilities into consideration, the responsibility as a father, responsibility as a son, responsibility as a husband, your responsibilities are there. God is not saying that if you want to follow me, you have to let go of your responsibilities and come and follow me. That's not what it is. We are not supposed to say, because I'm going to follow God, I'm going to let go of my responsibilities for my family members, relatives, friends, and myself. You ought to take care of your responsibilities. However, when your responsibilities hinder you from actually doing God's ministry, then you need to prioritize what responsibilities come first and what comes second. Not saying that you necessarily have to completely negate the responsibility, but you need to prioritize on what comes first and what comes second. In a discipleship journey, in a discipleship experience that we as individuals have many a times, including me myself, we have a problem with it. It's very difficult to have our priorities set right in such a way that we favor and we keep God first in each and every aspect of our life. It makes such a huge difficulty when you say, okay, you have church and you have church activities, for example, to go to, and at the same point of time, if your wife and your children are sick, definitely the church is not the aspect. Your wife and children are sick. That is a priority. However, on the contrary, there are certain times when they are lazy. That is not the time when you say, oh, you know what, I need to give priority to my family. No, that's not how it works. And that is a thing that we all have to inculcate over time in our discipleship journey. And the second aspect is you need to carry your cross daily and follow. This, in Luke, it doesn't say the word daily. There are other gospel passages which have the same passage, but in that passage it will be saying that you'll have to carry your cross daily and follow me. Now, what exactly is cross? Well, we had a huge sermon last time. I preached about this last time, and I don't want to go again into it. As I've said before, I don't want to re-preach. We have done with this last time when I preached here in this church. And all of us being part of this mature discipleship journey with Christ, it is an ongoing process where you keep God as your first priority, you keep God as your first responsibility, and you keep yourself and your family members, relatives, and friends as second in terms of priority with God. Now, why am I saying this, and why is it so important? And that is a place where we come to the following verses. And these two verses, the 34th verse and the 35th verse, they seem a little bit out of place. God, Jesus Christ, basically turns to these people who are following him, and he says, after saying all this, the two parables, the two examples and everything, he says, therefore, salt is good, but if even salt has become tasteless, with what will it be seasoned? It is useless either for the soil or for the manure pile. Obviously, for manure pile, Indians will know it better. In the villages, we have huge stuff with manure pile and all that we do with it. And so, salt is thrown out. The last part, the one who has ears to hear, let him hear. The people who are following, they were following him for days. We do not know why they were following. We do not know for what purpose they were following him. It was not mentioned in the Bible. It's not mentioned in this passage. However, when Jesus Christ tells this to them, it has some implication to it. They have been following him for quite some days. And if you read the passage, you can see that they have been following him for quite some days. However, when it comes to this exact verse, after a point of time, or when here in 34th verse, salt is basically good, but if salt has become tasteless, it's kind of useless. Why? In order to understand this critical part of the verse, I want all of us to jump to the next portion and the major part of today's meditation. Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 to 22. Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 to 22. Revelation is a very complicated book. Some don't believe in the prophetic nature of the book. Some believe in the prophetic nature of the book. But whatever the means it is, the Bible is meant for all of us, so we'll dive into it. To the angel of the church in Laodicea, write, the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the origin of creation, the origin of creation of God says this, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy, and I have no need of anything, and you do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. We'll get back to the verses. It's quite an irony because normally speaking, an individual can't drink freezing water, and similarly an individual can't drink hot water, right? Boiling water. We prefer room temperature water, which is basically lukewarm in nature, right? We normally prefer that way. Logically speaking, this verse doesn't make sense, does it? Right? Doesn't make that much sense. You can't drink freezing water. That's impossible. You literally will get a lot of medical problems when you do that. And you really cannot drink boiling water because boiling water you really can't drink, basically. You'll burn your tongue. However, if that was the case, Why is it that God's saying that I'll vomit you out of my mouth? Or why is it that God's saying that I'm going to spit you out of my mouth? It doesn't make logical sense, right? In order to understand this verse, we need to understand the context to which it's written. We simply take this and say, oh, you're a Christian, you're not supposed to be lukewarm like that. You either have to be loving God or you should be hating God. Only one option you have. But the problem with that is not how it works. I'll explain to you. This verse itself has so much of a background and a context to it that we do not even see and we are unable to understand what it has just by looking at it. Laodicea is basically the blue color box that on the leftmost picture, on the top left picture. The blue box is basically Laodicea. And as you can see, Ephesus, Philadelphia, and if you look at the trade routes, the black lines are basically the trade routes. That was you could say, the highways of those days. Laodicea was the central hub of the trade routes that goes from Ephesus down south and to the north to Philadelphia. Every single time a person has to come through, because it's a financial hub, there was a lot of money and there's a lot of income that Laodicea had. They were one of the richest cities. In AD 60, if I'm not wrong, it's AD 60, it seems Laodicea was struck with an earthquake. And because of the earthquake, there was a lot of destruction. The Roman Empire pretty much wanted to give funds to Laodicea so that they can rebuild the city. And the weirdest part is they said, we don't need it. They built the city again ground up with the funds that they had all by themselves. They didn't take one penny from the Roman Empire. They didn't take any help from any other empires that are nearby. And they completely built it ground up. You may feel, oh, that's nothing. I mean, those days the towns were not as big as Vancouver and they're not as big as Hyderabad in India or wherever it is. They're very small towns. It's easy to rebuild. But the problem is that's not where it works. That's not how it ends. I'll go back to where the money aspect becomes a huge thing. The second aspect where Laodicea was very prominent was with black wool. Black wool, as you know, is obviously they make garments out of it, clothing out of it. And because of this, black wool and because of the textile industry, you could say, in that area, it was very prominent for the Roman government too, because they needed a lot of armory and clothing from this area. And as you know, white clothes do not give you a lot of camouflage, black does. And so black wool and black clothing and everything that's over here, it has a huge significance, and that really gave them like an industrial district if you compare it to what we have today. And the third most important aspect that really set Laodicea apart from the rest of the world in the middle Mediterranean place was eye salve. It's basically an eye ointment through which some people say that it was so advanced that you could cure any kind of eye infection. Secondly, some people say that it was so advanced and it was so important that this eye ointment even used to sometimes restore the sight of blind people, to the extent where it restored the sight of blind people. It used to cure infections on skin and other aspects. It's just like an ointment. But it was so advanced for that particular time period and that time point that the whole world knew them for this. And in that context, now, when you look into and read this, there's one more aspect that we didn't put over here. There's one more aspect, and that is basically this. If you look into the previous slide, you have Laodicea, and above Laodicea you have Hierapolis, and below Laodicea you have Colossae. And you know what is Colossae, right? Colossians church. We read the epistle a lot. That's basically Colossians church. And so, one major aspect that set apart Laodicea from the rest of the places is because of the amount of money, the funding that they had. Hierapolis, Laodicea doesn't have any water bodies of its own. It doesn't have a lake, it doesn't have a river, it doesn't have a sea as such. But Hierapolis has hot water springs, and Colossae had cold water springs. This is where things get interesting. Hot water springs, they were warm water, very good for taking bath, obviously, and other stuff. But because of no water bodies in Laodicea, it was heavily dependent on the other cities around it to give it water supply. Now, in Hierapolis, even today, these are pictures that are recently taken, even today there are hot water springs. And the water in Hierapolis, they have a lot of calcium content, they have a lot of lime content in it. When the hot water is hot, lime and calcium are normal, they don't have so much. However, there is still a lot of lime deposit, as you can see in the pictures that are seen. The white walls that you see as if it's a filming location, that is basically all calcium deposits or lime deposits that have occurred over time. So what happened was, Laodicea, they decided to go a step notch because they have money, they have engineering, they have brain, they have everything. So they pretty much built what we can say as piping, but in those days aqueducts, all the way from Hierapolis to Laodicea, and again from Colossae to Laodicea. Now the reason why Colossae's water bodies are cold is because it's in a higher altitude than Laodicea. Hierapolis, hot water springs. And so what happened was, hot water used to travel through these massive aqueducts. As you can see, if there are two mountains and they wanted water to come across, they just built a bridge in those days. This is in 80-60 when you don't have cranes. This was a time when people had to literally do manual labor in order to get things moving. There were not trucks, there were nothing. But still they were able to bring such beautiful constructions just so that they can bring water into Laodicea. And as you can see, from Hierapolis, hot water used to come into Laodicea in the map. And again, from Colossae, they had cold water traveling to Laodicea. In this context, what happened was, over time, the water that started in Hierapolis, which was hot with calcium and lime, by the time it reached hundreds and hundreds of kilometers and come to Laodicea, the hot water would become lukewarm and sometimes even cold. And when it became cold, calcium started to build up in these water aqueducts. And what happened was, lime started to build up in these aqueducts, and the water became unusable. Unfortunately, they had to process the water a lot more before they could drink. And the second problem was, when the water was coming from Colossae, that is cold water, right? That should be fine. But that too, by the time it traveled down and by the time it came to Laodicea, it became warm water. And because it was not having calcium and other things, algae was perfect. Algae, you know, right? You know algae, the green stuff that grows in the water. And so it became so much problematic that they were not able to drink the water. It used to taste bad. It became quite hazardous to drink the water. It was not at all. It felt so much that it seems when you drink that water that has traveled so much in those aqueducts and after algae that's being grown in them, you really feel like you want to vomit. The taste is so horrible. So in that context, when God is writing to them, if you are lukewarm, I'm going to vomit you, that makes much more sense, doesn't it? That takes the whole understanding of why hot water and cold water makes that much more sense, why this is so important. And then if you go forward with the passage that we read, I advise to you, buy from me gold refined by fire. I know you are the financial hub. I know you are getting a lot of gold and silver, but you have to buy from me gold that is refined from fire. Second, so that you may become rich. Second, buy from me white garments so that you may clothe yourself and the shame of your nakedness will not be revealed. Your black wool will not be useful to you. You need to come and buy from me white garments. Thirdly, and the eye salve that you apply to your eyes, you should apply it so that you can see. Even though you are the inventors and you are the people who are having so much of medicinal background, you have this thing to you. You have to apply it in your life so that you can actually see. And it says, basically, in 17th verse, if you look at it, you do not know that you are wretched, you are miserable, you are poor, you are blind, and you are naked. Every aspect in life where the Laodiceans were so proud of themselves, or what you can say as they were so settled that they didn't want to go any further, those aspects God brought them out and they said, even though you have these, you are still miserable, you are still poor, you are still blind, and you are still naked. Why? Lukewarmness, the whole aspect of being lukewarm is, I think I'm done with the slideshow. You can, So the whole concept of lukewarm nature is very predominant in our Christian lives. That's something which we fail to understand. Let's get back. Now that we went for this Israel tour, and now that we have seen all the places, let's get back to our senses. Why? Why is it that this is so important? Why is it this lukewarmness is so horrible? Why does God want to spit this lukewarmness? Lukewarm nature is nothing but not showing any interest, enthusiasm, or concern. In a single word in English, it's called apathy. Apathy means you don't have interest, you don't have concern, you don't have enthusiasm. Many people forget and mistake that the opposite of love is hatred. That's not true. You see, technically it is true. Yes, you either love someone or you hate someone. Yes, but the point which I'm trying to make is, at the essence of it, when you say that I love someone, you are consciously making a decision that this person deserves my admiration. When you hate someone, you are consciously making a decision saying that this person is worthy to be despised of. He doesn't have any worthiness. He's not worthy of my love. He's not worthy of my attention. And so he belongs to one category, and you have another category which is love. You have love, you have hatred. Apathy is a sense of nothingness. You don't love the person, you don't hate the person. There's no meaning and there's no sense in it. In the present day life, you could say that this is like a shoulder shrugs nature of, people do this. I don't know. Yeah, can be. That in a sense, in the present world, you could say it's a shoulder shrugs nature of faith. Some people use the wave of hand. Asian countries we have, just do it. You don't have any point. You don't care if it is you're going for it or you're not going for it. It's just do it. I'm not interested in it. It's a state of whateverness. Whatever it is doesn't matter. It's okay. As long as I'm coming to the church, as long as I'm doing it, I'm fine. It's okay, it doesn't matter. The rest of these things are they're useless. And that is a state where God is saying, if you are in that state, I will vomit you out of my mouth. When you're loving God, you have consciously made a decision, you're striving towards love. When you're hating God, you have consciously made a decision and you're running away from Him. When you're in a state of whateverness, when you're shoulder shrugging, it means you're not having any interest in either loving God or hating Him. You don't have a stand, you don't have an opinion, you don't have a platform where you say, okay, this is what I am, and this is what I want to do with my life and my faith. We also are very similar to the Laodicean church, living in Vancouver, full abroad. Medicine, free medicine. You have MSP, all the PR people will have free medical aspects. Citizens and the PR guys, which I'm jealous of anyway. You have a lot of constructions, big bridges everywhere. Coming to Surrey, every single time I have to, cross a bridge and come. Very big bridge. You have a lot of constructions. We are at the pinnacle of engineering marvel around the world as a church. We are financially blessed. Even though we have COVID hitting us from all directions, we still are able to use technology to the best of our interest and, go beyond. We have very good, posh, branded clothing. I'm not saying no to that. It's a very good thing. Same with them too. They had good clothing. But at the end of the day, God is still going to say to us, you are naked, you're miserable, you're poor. Why? It's because of the nature that we are in. This life that we live, when you love God and when you want to have this discipleship journey with God, you can't be in a state of nothingness. You have to actively pursue your journey with God. You have to actively doesn't necessarily mean, please understand, that you come to the church every day and sing in the church or do whatever. Actively means consciously in each and every aspect of your life, you are making conscious and active decisions where you keep God as your priority in your responsibilities. You don't say no to the responsibilities that you are given. You prioritize in such a way that no matter which other aspect of your life you look at, everyone should say, oh my God, he hates everybody else except God. It may not be true, but at the essence of it, everything else should be so insignificant when you actively pursue God. And that is the real essence of discipleship. It's powerful. When we first came to the faith, when we first accepted God as our personal Savior, I know myself too included, reading a lot of articles, trying to understand a lot, asking a lot of questions, discussing a lot of questions with people around us. Spent days and days and days reading the Bible in different aspects of it, trying to figure out the deep questions that you are having a lot of confusions about. Always prioritizing various aspects of life, giving so much of attention to God. And this morning, the questions that we have to ask ourselves is, have we come to a position in life where we feel we know everything and that's all? Have we come to a position in life where we depend on our own achievements rather than God? Have we come to a position in life that just because we have various aspects in our life, have we come to a state where you shoulder shrug everything when it comes to your spiritual life? That is the essence of discipleship. I'll give you a small example, a lighter note. I have one of my friend, no names. You know who it is. But anyway, the person listening to will definitely know who it is. He told me once, I love God so much that I gave up eating pork because I became a Christian. Wow, amazing. I'm not saying that you should eat pork or shouldn't eat pork. That is not the cost of discipleship. Please get our senses back to ourselves. The cost of discipleship is not about eating pork or not eating pork. The cost of discipleship is not about the rules and regulations that you follow, but it is about the priority that you give to God in life. This wonderful morning, I would like all of us to consciously understand the essence of discipleship. This morning I would like all of us to understand that just because we are following God, God can, look back at us and say, it's not worth it. What are you doing? He can call us people who are saltless, tasteless people. He can call us people who are, even though we have everything, miserable, poor, and naked. The question is, are we in that situation? It's a self-retrospecting question. Only you will know about yourself. Only I will know about myself. And this wonderful morning, there is a question that God wants to ask each and every one of us. Are we consciously giving priority to God? Keeping this long, short sermon into our hearts, I would like to give time to our pastor so that he can, let us say, summarize it a little bit in Tamil so that some of the other Tamil-speaking congregants can understand, and we'll proceed to our Holy Communion.
Amen. Thanks, Pastor. எல்லாருக்கும் புரிஞ்சிருக்கும். இருந்தாலும் அது கர்த்தர் லூக் 14 என்ன சொல்கிறார்? யாதொருவன் என்னிடத்தில் வந்து தன் தகப்பனையும் தாயையும் மனைவியையும் பிள்ளைகளையும் சகோதரரையும் சகோதரிகளையும் தன் ஜீவனையும் வெறுக்காவிட்டால் எனக்கு சீசனாக இருக்க மாட்டான் அப்படின்னு சொல்லப்படுது. அதில் வந்து தவறாக நிறைய பேர் புரிஞ்சிக்க வாய்ப்புகள் உண்டு. கடவுள் வந்து நேசிக்க தான் சொல்கிறேன்னு வெறுக்க சொல்கிறாரு அப்படிங்கிற எண்ணம் சிலருக்கு வரலாம். அப்படி இல்லை, இது அப்படி சொல்லப்படலை. இதை சொல்லிட்டு கீழே என்ன சொல்கிறாருன்னா, உப்பை வந்து உதாரணமாக சொல்கிறாரு. அந்த உப்பு ஏன் உதாரணமாக சொல்கிறார் அப்படின்னா, அதுதான் அவர் சொன்னார். அவர் சொன்னதை கொஞ்சம் தியரட்டிக்கலாக சொன்னார், நான் கொஞ்சம் ப்ராக்டிக்கலாக நான் அதை சொல்கிறேன். உப்பு வந்து உங்களுக்கு தெரியும், அதுக்குன்னு ஒரு யூனிக்னஸ் உண்டு. அதை வச்சு தான் ப்ரிசர்வேட்டிவ் பண்ணுவாங்க. அது சில அதாவது கெட்டு போகாமல் இருக்கிறதுக்காக அது உபயோகப்படுத்தப்பட்டது. இப்போ தான் நமக்கு ஃப்ரிட்ஜஸ்லாம் வந்துச்சு. அது வந்து மெயின் ரீசன். உப்பு வந்து கடவுள் படைத்ததில் மிகப்பெரிய ரீசன் வந்து அது எதையும் கெட்டு போகாமல் பாதுகாத்துக்கணும். அந்த அளவுக்கு அதுக்கு பெரிய யூனிக்னஸ் இருக்குது. அதை தவிர அதனுடைய யூனிக்னஸ் அதை இழந்துடுச்சு அப்படின்னா அதை எங்கேயுமே யூஸ் பண்ண முடியாது. ஆரம்ப காலத்தில் இப்போ என்ன பண்ணியிருக்காங்கன்னா, இறந்து போனவங்களோட எடுத்து போடுவாங்க மண்ணில். அப்புறம் வந்து என்ன பண்ணுவாங்க, டாய்லெட்டுக்கு, அப்போ இந்த மாதிரி டாய்லெட்டு கிடையாது, அப்போ என்ன மண்ணை தோண்டி இதை டாய்லெட்டு முடிஞ்ச மாதிரி உப்பு தூக்கி போட்டு போவாங்க. அது வந்து இன்ஃபெக்ஷன் ஆகாமல் இருக்கிறதுக்காக. ஒன்று பொருளை சாப்பிட்ற சாப்பாட்டை பாதுகாக்கிறதுக்கும் நம்மளை நோயிலிருந்து பாதுகாக்கிறதுக்கும் இந்த உப்பு உபயோகப்படுத்தப்பட்டிருக்கு. அப்போ அதுக்குன்னு ஒரு விசேஷமான ஒரு இது கடவுள் வந்து படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கார். அப்போ அந்த உப்பு வந்து டைல்யூட் ஆயிடுச்சுன்னா என்னாகும், எதுக்குமே டாய்லெட்டு கூட யூஸ் பண்ண முடியாது. அது உப்பு டைல்யூட் ஆயிடுச்சுன்னா ஒன்றுமே பண்ண முடியாது, யூனிக்னஸே போயிடும். அதை தான் இங்கே என்ன சொல்கிறாரு, யாதொருவன் என்னிடத்தில் வந்து தன் தகப்பனையும் தாயையும் மனைவியையும் பிள்ளைகளையும் சகோதரன் வெறுக்காவிட்டால். அப்போ இந்த வார்த்தையை ஏன் அவர் அன்பான கடவுள் ஏன் இந்த வார்த்தையை சொல்கிறாருன்னா, என்னையும் உங்களையும் ராஜரீகமாக படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறோம். 1 Peter 2:9 நம்ம எப்படி படைக்கப்பட்ட படைப்புன்னு சொல்லப்பட்டிருக்குது. நம்ம வந்து தேர்ந்தெடுக்கப்பட்டவர்கள், நம்ம பிறப்பதுக்கு முன்பே தேர்ந்தெடுக்கப்பட்டவர்களாகவும் ராஜரீக பரம்பரையாகவும் அவரோட ராஜாங்கத்தில் உட்காருவதற்காக நம்ம படைக்கப்பட்ட படைப்பாக இருக்கிற நம்ம டைல்யூட் ஆகப்படுறோம். எப்படி டைல்யூட் ஆகப்படுறோம்? நம்முடைய சொந்தத்தின் மூலமாகவே. இவர் அக்கா தம்பி அண்ணன் மாமா மச்சானை மட்டும் வெறுக்க சொல்ல, தன்னையும் சொல்கிறாரு. நல்லா கவனிச்சுக்க, தன் ஜீவனையும் வெறுக்காவிட்டால். இப்போது நானும் எனக்கு இந்த உலகம் சொல்லும் பேச்சை கேட்டு நான் டைல்யூட் ஆகி என்னுடைய யூனிக்னஸை நான் எப்படி படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறேன், கடவுளை போலே படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறேன். அப்போது எப்படி உப்பு அதுக்கு படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கோ அதனுடைய சாரத்தன்மை போனால் அது எங்கேயுமே உபயோகப்படுத்த முடியாதோ, அதே போல் என்னுடைய படைப்பும் நான் டைல்யூட் பண்ணிட்டேன் அப்படின்னா நான் எதுக்கும் உபயோகப்படுத்தப்பட முடியாது. அது கீழே எக்ஸாம்பிள் சொல்லிட்டு வர்றார். 2 எக்ஸாம்பிள் எப்படி சொல்கிறாரு. ஒன்று வந்து படையெடுக்க போகும்போது ஒன்றை விட அதிகமான ஆட்கள் இருக்கும்போது என்ன பண்ணுவேன், டப்புன்னு கீழே விழுந்துருவேன். அப்படி தானே சொல்கிறாரு. நீ இப்போ உடனே சமாதானத்தை எடுத்துக்கொண்டு, ஏன்னா அவன் என்னோட பலவானாக இருக்கிறான். பலவானாக இருக்கான்னு தெரிஞ்சு அவனோட போய் சண்டை போட்டால் என்னாகும், ஒன்று அவன்கிட்ட அடி வாங்கணும், இல்லைனா அவனை சிறைப்பிடிச்சி அவனோட போய் உட்காந்து வச்சுருவான். அப்படி தானே அடிச்சுட்டு நம்மளெல்லாம் சிறைப்பிடிக்கப்பட்டு என்ன பண்ணுவோம், அவங்களுக்கு அடிமையிலாகவும் அவங்களுடைய ராஜாங்கத்துக்கு கீழே நம்ம வேலை செய்யப்படியாக ஆகிவிடும். அதுதானே அதனுடைய மீனிங். இப்போ என்ன சொல்கிறாரு, நான் ஒன்றை இப்போ அதாவது ஒவ்வொரு நானும் நீங்களும் எப்படி அவரே போல் படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கிறோன்னா, நான் என் சிலுவையை சுமந்து என்னை டைல்யூட் ஆகாமல் வச்சுக்கிட்டாதான் நான் கர்த்தருக்காக நான் நிற்க முடியும். இல்லாமல் நான் யாருனே தெரியாமல் உலகத்தோடு சேர்ந்து நான் படையெடுத்தேன்னா நானும் என்னை இழந்து இந்த உலகத்தின் அடிமையாக்கி கர்த்தருக்கு விரோதமான செயல்களை என்னை அறியாமலே செய்து கொள்ள வாய்ப்புகள் வரும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு தான் அவர் அப்படியே வெளிப்படுத்தினதுக்கு போகிறாரு. வெளிப்படுத்தினதில் நம்ம என்ன பார்த்தோம்? மூணாவது வெளிப்படுத்தினது 3 17, 18, 19 படிங்க. 17, 18 படிங்க.
நீ நிர்பாக்கியம் உள்ளவனும் பரிதபிக்கப்படத்தக்கவனும் தரித்திரனும் குருடனும் நிர்வாணியுமாய் இருக்கிறதை அறியாமல் நான் ஐஸ்வர்யவான் என்றும் திரவிய சம்பன்னன் என்றும் எனக்கு ஒரு குறைவும் இல்லை என்றும் சொல்லுகிறபடியால் நான் நீ ஐஸ்வர்யவான் ஆகும்படிக்கு நெருப்பிலே புடமிடப்பட்ட பொன்னையும் உன் நிர்வாணமாகிய அவலட்சணம் தோன்றாதபடிக்கு நீ உடுத்திக் கொள்வதற்கு வெண்வஸ்திரங்களையும் என்னிடத்திலே வாங்கிக் கொள்ளவும் நீ பார்வை அடியும்படிக்கு உன் கண்களுக்கு கலிக்கம் போடவும் வேண்டும் என்று உனக்கு ஆலோசனை சொல்லுகிறேன்.
இதுதான் பாஸ்டர் சொன்னார். அதாவது நான் ஐஸ்வர்யன் ஆகும்படிக்கும் நெருப்பிலே புடமிடப்பட்ட பொன்னையும் உன் நிர்வாணமாக அவலட்சணம் தோன்றாதபடிக்கு நீ உடுத்துக்கொள்வதற்கு வெண் வஸ்திரங்களையும் என்னிடத்திலே வாங்கிக் கொள்ளவும் நீ பார்வையடையும்படிக்கு உன் கண்களுக்கு கலிங்கம் போட வேண்டும் என்று உனக்கு ஆலோசனை சொல்கிறேன். எதுக்கு ஆலோசனை சொல்கிறேன்? இதெல்லாம் செய்யணும்னா நான் டைலூட் ஆகாமல் இருக்கணுங்கிறதுக்காக. என்னுடைய ஸ்திரம், என்னுடைய யுனிக்னஸ் டைலூட் ஆகி போச்சுன்னா நான் எப்படி இருப்பேன்னா தரித்திரனும் குருடனும் நிர்வாணமுமாக இருப்பேன்னு சொல்கிறாரு. அப்படி தானே சொல்கிறேன். ஆனால் நம்ம என்ன செஞ்சிட்ருக்குறோம்? எப்படி சொல்கிறோம்? நான் எனக்கு எல்லாம் இருக்குது. ஐ கவுன்சல் யூ டு பை ஃப்ரம் மீ கோல்டு ரிஃபைன் இன் த ஃபயர் ஸோ யூ கேன் பிகம் ரிச் அண்ட் ஒயிட் கிளாஸ் டு வேர். அப்படி. ஆனால் நம்ம என்ன பண்ணுறோம்? அது தெரியாமலேயே நம்ம இருந்துகிட்ருக்கோம். நம்ம டைலூட் ஆகிறது நமக்கு தெரியாமலேயே நம்ம இருந்துகிட்ருக்குறோம். அதனால தான் லூக் வார்ம் வாட்டரை சொல்கிறாரு, நெருப்பும் இல்லாமல் குளிரும் இல்லாமல் இருக்கிறோன்னு. ஏன் நெருப்புக்குன்னு ஒரு யூனிக்னஸ் இருக்குது, குளிருக்குன்னு ஒரு யூனிக்னஸ் இருக்குது. அது ரெண்டுமே டைலூட் ஆயிடுச்சுன்னா எதில் நிற்கும்? லூக் வார்மில் தான் நிற்கும். அப்போ நானும் நீங்களும் டைலூட் ஆகாமல் இருக்கணும் அப்படின்னா எனக்கு அவர் என்னை எப்படி படைச்சிருக்காரு? அவருடைய சாயலை படைச்சிருக்காரு. உங்களை எப்படி படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கோம்? நம்ம எல்லாரும் அவருடைய சாயலை படைக்கப்பட்டிருக்கோம். இந்த உப்பு எப்படி சாரமற்று போகாமல் இருக்கணுமோ அப்படின்னா அதே போல் நானும் நீங்களும் அவருடைய சரீரத்தை அவரை சாயலை நம்ம பெற்றவர்களாக இருக்கும்போது எந்த நேரத்திலும் டைலூட் ஆனால் அது யாரோட மகிமைக்கு இழிவாக இருக்கப்படும்? கர்த்தருடைய நாமம் இழிவாக ஏற்படும். அப்போது நான் டைலூட் ஆகாமல் இருக்கணும், நான் லூக் வார்ம் வாட்டராக மாறாமல் இருக்கணும். என்னுடைய ஸ்திரத்தன்மை என்னுடைய படைப்புக்கு உண்டான படைப்பை நான் உறுதிப்படுத்தினா அவருக்குள்ளே நிற்கணும் அப்படின்னு நான் ஒவ்வொருத்தரும் நினைக்கும் போது நான் கர்த்தரை நினைக்கிறேன். அப்போது என்னை டைலூட் பண்ணதுக்கு என்னுடைய தாயோ தகப்பனோ குழந்தைகளோ என்னுடைய மாமாவோ மச்சானோ தாத்தாவோ பாட்டியோ நானோ என்னுடைய ஸ்திரத்தன்மை என்னுடைய யுனிக்னஸை இழப்பதற்கு காரணமாக இருக்கும் பட்சத்தில் அவர்களை நம்ம வெறுத்து, ஆனால் அன்பை எடுத்துக்க சொல்லலை. அன்பாக இருக்கணும். அன்பு மாத்திரமே உண்மையானது. கர்த்தர் நமக்கு எவ்வளோ அன்பாக இருக்கிறார். நீ உன்னை நேசிப்பது மட்டும் இல்லாமல் பிறரை நேசி, உன் சகோதரி அதை தான் கடவுள் சொல்லிட்டு இருக்காரு. இப்போ நல்ல கவனிச்சுக்கு, உன்னுடைய யூனிக்னஸ் டைலூட் ஆகிடக்கூடாது, என்னுடைய யூனிக்னஸ் டைலூட் ஆகிடக்கூடாது. ஏன்னா நம்ம படைக்கப்பட்ட படைப்பு அப்படிப்பட்ட ராஜரீகமான படைப்பு. அதனால தான் இதில் சொல்லுது மூணாவது கீழே படிங்க. வெளிப்படுத்தின 3 என்ன சொல்ல? நான் ஜெயங்கொண்டு என் பிதாவினுடைய சிங்காசனத்தில் அவரோட கூட உட்கார்ந்தது போல ஜெயங்கொள்கிறவன் எவனோ அவனும் என்னுடைய சிங்காசனத்தில் என்னோட கூட உட்காரும்படி அருள் செய்வேன். அப்படி தானே சொல்லப்படுது. அப்போது இது எதுக்கு இதெல்லாம் சொல்கிறாரு? அவரோட நானும் நீங்களும் உட்காரணுங்கிறதுக்காக. அப்போ நான் என்னை இழந்து போகாமல் இருக்கணும், நீங்கள் உங்களுடைய தன்மையை இழந்து போகாமல் இருக்கணும். அப்படின்னா அவருடைய சாயலை பெற்ற நாம் எதையெல்லாம் வெறுக்கணுமோ வெறுத்து தன்னுடைய சொந்த சிலுவை எடுத்து அவருக்கு பின்னாடி போகும்பொழுது நான் குளிரும் ஆகாமல் அனலும் ஆகாதவளாக இருந்து, அதாவது என்னுடைய யூனிக்னஸில் நான் ஸ்டேபிளாக இருந்து கர்த்தருடைய வருகையை நோக்கி இருக்கும் பொழுது நான் ஒரு நாம மகிமடியும்படியாக நம்ம எல்லாரும் இருப்போம். ஓகே பாஸ்டர் ப்ளீஸ்.